Born into what would define a normal American family, I am Emily. Jack, my dad, was a driven man who launched from nothing his own paint and varnish company. Your classic housewife. Mom, Sarah, was usually occupied with housework and gossip. Then there was my mother's favorite apple, 5 years my senior, my older brother, Tom. Dad was buried in work and drowned in loans he had taken out to launch his company, scarcely often around. When he showed up, he would lock himself in his office murmuring about profit margins and invoices. From the first day, Mom made it abundantly evident that Tom was her favorite. She would murmur, "Oh, Tommy, you're my joy, my everything," even though he returned home ravenous for cheap beer or with black eye from another fight. Me as well. I was simply there, basically an afterthought. Not to misunderstand, Dad loved me in his own unique manner. He would use gifts to try to offset his absence. He handed me an awkward video camera for my 9-year birthday. "Capture our family events, sweetheart," he added, tiredly smiling. He had no idea that camera would transform everything. One Sunday, maybe 10 years ago, I recall Dad had agreed to accompany us to the park, but unexpectedly, he was summoned into work. Mom went blank. Red with wrath, she yelled, "Jack, for Christ's sake, it's Sunday. You are needed by your children. I am in need of you." Recording everything, I stood in the corridor with the nasty camera in hand. They hardly paid attention to me either. Dad's voice fell to a whisper. "If you simply support the company—" Mom laughed, but that sounded not like happiness. "Help out with your pipe dream? Wake awake, Jack. For a business that is nowhere, you are drowning us in debt." Heart thumping, I lowered the camera. Though that was the worst battle I had seen, it was not the first. Though I felt our family was disintegrating, I didn't really know what was occurring. The anxiety in our house intensified as the days passed. Dad worked longer hours and found the stillness between him and Mom to be intolerable when he was home. Tom started acting out more, arriving late at home, ravenous for cigarettes and God knows what else. I woke up one evening to find broken glass all around. Camera in hand, I slipped downstairs. It had evolved for me into a kind of security blanket. Mom was in the kitchen, surrounded by broken bits of her preferred vase. "Mom," I said softly. Her eyes blinded over, she turned to face me. "Go back to bed, Kath." She staggered. It was at this point I spotted the half-empty wine bottle on the counter. Mom made pancakes, Dad read the newspaper, and Tom slumped over his cereal. The next day, everything seemed regular once more. But just now I knew better. Benevolent under surface, our family was breaking like the vase. Just another Tuesday when my universe exploded. Tom was 15. I was 10. Neither of us knew what was about to strike us. I heard the front door smash while still in my room adjusting my camera. Dad's voice echoed throughout the house, more furious than I had ever heard. "Sarah, start down here right now." Curious and afraid, I crept to the top of the steps, camera in hand. Force of habit, I suppose. Mom walked grudgingly into the living room. "What's got your panties in a twisted, Jack?" Dad pushed a manila envelope at her, red on his face and quivering hands. "Take care to explain this." I focused on Mom's face and zipped in. She seemed different, almost relieved rather than terrified or guilty. "Well," Dad insisted, "what have you got to say for yourself?" Mom laughed and turned aside the papers. I shivered at that frigid, brutal sound. "What would you like me to say, Jack?" Apologies. You wish for the truth. Years of cheating on you have left you wondering. I delighted in each minute of it. I staggered, almost dropped my camera. Dad looked to have been gutly punched. "Why, Sarah? Why would you go for this?" Jack said, "Because you were never here." Mom burst. "You and your awful company. Did you honestly believe I would sit about waiting for you indefinitely?" Dad responded softly, "I did it for us, for our family." Mom laughed heartily. Family questions. For what family? Jack, we have years of brokenness. I was merely the first one to acknowledge it. The debate carried on for hours. Though my arms hurt and tears burned in my eyes, I captured every agonizing minute of it. Too involved in their own drama, they never spotted me standing there. The next few weeks melted together. More shouting matches than I could count, subdued phone calls, and slammed doors abound. Spending most of his time isolated in his room, Tom withdrew yet more into his own world. Mom and Dad finally sat us down one evening. "Kids," Mom started, "your dad and I, we're getting a divorce. Sweetie, you will be staying with your father. Tom will be here with me." Tom shrugged as like he couldn't care less, but I could see relief in his eyes. Dad showed generosity. He left the house with Mom and began paying Tom his child support as well. At least physically, the relocation was swift and painless. Though it was little unlike the house we had left behind, our new apartment was ours. I thought I could breathe for the first time in years. Still, it wasn't easy. Working longer than ever, Dad sought to keep the company solvent and cover all expenses. On certain evenings, I would find him seated at the kitchen table, head in his hands, surrounded by bills. 5 years passed in a haze of homework, part-time work, and watching Dad fight to keep his company surviving. When everything changed once more, I was 15. This time things improved. Rachel was her name, and she whirled into our lives. I recall the day Dad first introduced us. On his face he wore a ridiculous smile not seen in years. "Kay, Emily, Rachel is here. She used to intern at the company. Now, well, we're seeing one other." Rachel grinned friendlily. "It's fantastic to have at last met Emily. Your dad always talks of you." I measured her, prepared to despise her on moral grounds, but something about Rachel made it impossible. She gazed at Dad like he hung the moon, real, kind, and honest. Rachel arrived in our life permanently not too long ago. She moved in a few months later, and our small flat seemed like a home once more. I listened one evening in the kitchen while they spoke. "Jack, my dad said, Dad's willing to finance that new production line you've been dreaming about," Rachel said. "He thinks of you, Jack." "We both do." I peered over the corner and saw Dad tightly hugging Rachel, whispering, "What did I do to deserve you?" It struck me then, this was the ideal of love. Not the sour, resentful mess I grew up with, but rather this support, trust, and true pleasure. The next several years resembled watching a rocket launch. The company shot skyward with Rachel's contacts and Dad's experience. Rachel's dad's hardware stores loved the new paint line, and shortly orders from all throughout the nation were flooding in. Heads bowed over spreadsheets, Dad and Rachel were seen working late into the night, gently debating growth ideas. But unlike the debates I recalled from my early years, these usually concluded in laughter and a kiss. "Why do you two not simply get married already?" One evening during dinner, I inquired. They exchanged a glance and started giggling. "Oh, sweetie," Rachel murmured, wiping tears from her eyes, "our love doesn't need a government stamp of approval." Understood even if I rolled my eyes. Their happiness counted just as much. Regarding me, well, I was doing really nicely too. Driven to please Dad, I put myself into my academics. I had no idea what I wanted to pursue following my college graduation, and thus we were an unstoppable trio. Dad with his industry knowledge, Rachel with her business sense, and me with fresh ideas from college. We were tenacious. Dad was rich, like private jet and vacation properties rich, 10 years after Rachel entered our life. It was crazy. Mother and Tom. That is quite another can of worms. Not since that terrible Thanksgiving when Mom got drunk and branded Rachel a homewrecker had I spoken to any of them in years. Tom helped her and labeled me a traitor. I had departed in tears that evening, pledging never to put myself under such torture once more. Sometimes I would see Mom's name show up on my phone or get a random text from Tom requesting money. I always paid them no attention. Though it stung, I had made my decision. I choose love, achievement, and pleasure. Life has a nasty way of dragging the rug out from under you just when everything appears to be in order. For us, that Saturday in June came under clear sunshine. Dad has been mentioning bungee jumping for several weeks. Eyes glistening with enthusiasm, he would exclaim, "Life's too short to play it safe." Rachel and I attempted to talk him out of it, but you know how Dad was when he decided on anything. The call arrived soon after noon. Every terrible detail, the shaky voice of the bungee instructor, the phrases, "heart attack," and didn't make it ringing in my ears, the sound of Rachel's coffee mug breaking on the kitchen floor, comes back to me. It lacked reality. Dad disappeared. Taken down by a foolish bungee leap, the man who had created an empire from nothing had survived every storm life presented. To tell it straightforward, the funeral was essentially a performance. Half the city seemed to have turned there to pay their respects. Business colleagues in dark suits, staff members with red-rimmed eyes, acquaintances and relatives we hadn't seen in years. Though Dad would have despised all the commotion, his touching of so many lives filled my heart. And then Mom and Tom arrived. At first, I almost couldn't identify them. Mom appeared ancient. Her face was swollen and lined, eyes bloodshot. Tom slumped next to her, all muscle and attitude, looking as though he would much prefer be anywhere else. Though few rose behind us, their shouts carried. Mother's voice slurred. Well, Jack finally got what was coming to him. I bit my lip so forcefully I tasted blood. How brave they are! How dare they disrespect Dad like this whilst here? Still, it deteriorated. Mom's voice sank to a conspiratorial whisper that seemed louder than it had ever been. I heard his tiny partner paid for the bungee leap personally and set everything in order. Most likely understood his heart could not handle it. I guess wanted her hands on his money. I could no more bear it. I turned around, tears and wrath distorting my sight. "Shut up!" I screamed. "Just shut the heck off. How dare you come here and disseminate your deadly lies?" Rachel liked Dad and vice versa. Nothing more. This was a horrible accident. So just leave if you cannot exhibit some simple human decency and respect. Nobody particularly wants you here either. The chapel stopped talking. Everybody turned to look at us. Mom got up and swayed just a little. "Come on, Tom. We are leaving. Let them organize their small pity party. She will see them at the will reading." The remainder of the funeral was lost in a fog of grief and resentment, but I couldn't get rid of the impression that our problems were only beginning as we stood beside Dad's grave and watched the casket lowered. 2 weeks following our burial of Dad, we convened in Mr. Goldstein's office for the will reading. With a knife, one could cut the thick enough tension in the room. Rachel sat next to me, her expression under control. Mom slumped in her chair as though she would much prefer be anywhere else. Arm crossed, Tom stood beside the window, scowling at nothing specifically. Mr. Goldstein cleared his throat, then started reading. "I, Jack Thompson, am of sound mind and body, and so do." My heart thumping, I tuned out the legal language. "Furthermore, to my daughter Emily, I leave all my worldly possessions, including all properties, bank accounts, and full ownership of Thompson Paint and Varnish Company." The place went absolutely dead silence. I thought I might not be breathing. Mr. Goldstein said on. "To my son Thomas and ex-wife Sarah, I leave $20,000 apiece." We all jumped at Mom's scream. "This is junk. That company sprang from my concept. For Jack and that damned business, I gave everything. While he was off playing businessman, I brought up his kids. That company rightly belongs to me. I shot Rachel a quick glance. She sat there, cool as usual, but I could sense the faint shaking in her hands. With a firm voice, "Mom," I said, "Dad started that company from nothing. When he first started, you hardly even thought of him." She came around me, eyes burning. "You little brat, unappreciative. I ought to have known you would have sided with him. Were you not Daddy's little daughter always?" I drew in a long breath. "Look, I do not want to fight. I will offer you 100 grand should it help you feel better. Just let us finish this here." Mom laughed, a sour, hostile sound. 1,000 grand. You assume you could simply buy me off that. Not sure, darling. I have a lawsuit in mind. Son of a bitch owes me every last penny, which I am going to grab. Enough. Mr. Goldstein's voice sliced across the dispute. The will is legally strong and clear. Mrs. Thompson, if you want to challenge it, you are welcome to follow the correct legal procedures. Now, assuming nothing else, I believe we are done here." Mom slammed the door behind her as she hurried out. Tom followed, but before he looked at me that would cause milk to curdle. I felt weight fall on my shoulders as Rachel and I walked from the office. Dad's enterprise, his legacy, now all mine. And presumably so were his issues. Following the incident at Mr. Goldstein's office, Rachel and I withdrew to Dad's, my penthouse. As we both struggled to make sense of what had just transpired, the stillness was intolerable. "Rachel," I said, breaking the silence, "we should discuss the company. You should share a piece of it, 20%. Rachel's eyes became wide with disbelief. "Emily, number not clear. You were left it by your father. That is yours." I turned my head away. "Our is it? You have spent time and energy in addition to money in it. You guided it toward what it is now. It is only reasonable." Tears tore across Rachel's eyes. She had put me in a firm hug before I knew it. "Thank you," she said in a whisper. "Jack would be rather proud of you." That afternoon we signed the docs. It felt natural, as if I were simultaneously honoring Dad's memory and safeguarding our future. Mom naturally couldn't let us celebrate even this little triumph, though. 2 weeks later brought the lawsuit. Mom was wanting most of Dad's stuff as well as the whole company. Her attorney flitted around terms like marital assets and unjust enrichment, but it all boiled down to one thing. She sought what she thought Dad owed her. Court visits, depositions, and restless nights blended together in the next few months. Driven not to let Mom's resentment destroy all Dad had worked for, Rachel and I immersed ourselves into operating the business. The judge turned Mom's suit down ultimately. The will persisted. That would be the end of it, but I ought to have known better. Mom's attorney dumped the bomb during the last hearing. "Your Honor, we recently discovered that Rachel Carson, the deceased's girlfriend, had taken over a sizable chunk of the company. Given this fresh material, we would like to sue Miss Carson separately." My heart slumped. I looked at Rachel, who had gone pallid. Looking as worn out as I felt, the judge questioned, "On what grounds?" "Your Honor, alienation of affection. We have cause to suspect Miss Carson broke off my client's marriage years ago by having an affair with the dead. What I was listening to astounded me. That was a lie, all of it. But Mom's triumphant face let me know she didn't give the truth much thought. She simply wanted to grab what she considered to be hers and damage us. Reporters crowded us as we left the courtroom that day, putting microphones in our faces and yelling questions. "Miss Thompson, did you know of your father's affair?" "Miss Carson, how long did you work with Jack Thompson? Is it true you're handing your inheritance to the mistress of your father?" Rachel tugged me through the throng by grabbing my hand. She said, "No comment," her voice firm even as I could feel her fingers quaking in mine. I fell apart once we were securely in the car. "I'm so sorry, Rachel. I'm entirely at fault here. Had I not assigned you a piece of the business? Stop, Rachel declared with great conviction. You did not do anything illegal. Your mother is lashing out and wounded and enraged. We will, however, get through this together. I nodded and dabbed at my eyes. Together, I responded. I couldn't help but think at what cost and how much more we would have to go through before this was over as our driver negotiated downtown traffic. The day the trial started, I felt as though I might be sick. Though my gut turned over at the thought of testifying against my own mother, I knew it was essential. Rachel demanded justice. Mom had to pay for her actions. Mom's eyes blazing into me could be felt as I sat in the witness stand. But I concentrated on Rachel's motivating grin and discovered the will to speak. Your Honor, I said, my voice oddly consistent, I have evidence that directly challenges my mother's assertions. As I discussed the old tapes I had discovered, the courtroom went quiet. I turned in the cassettes to the court, shaking hands. The first video that came on displayed a much younger version of my parents in our old living room. Mom spoke in the courtroom, slurred but lucid. Jack, you want for the truth? Good. Years of cheating on you have resulted in what? I regret it hardly at all. Though I couldn't look at Mom, I heard her gasp clearly. The video went on showing all of her falsehoods and transgressions. I then went over the detective's report Dad had retained. It went into great length about Mom's affairs with dates, times, and pictures. As you can see, Your Honor, I said, my mother's allegations of my father having an affair with Rachel are utterly untrue. Actually, it was my mother who betrayed their marriage. As the judge went over the facts, his face was austere. Mom's attorney seemed as though he wanted to slip down to the floor. The decision came out to be clear-cut. The judge ordered Mom to pay all legal bills in addition to rejecting her lawsuit against Rachel. Mom found it unpleasant. Saying things you wouldn't hear from your own mother, she denigrated Rachel and myself. She kept screaming until the judge had to penalize her for contempt of court since she was spewing obscenities. She turned to me as the bailiffs walked her out, her eyes ablaze with hate. Catherine, this is not over. You will be sorry about this. I will swear to God. That would mark the end of it, I thought. I was incorrect. A few days later, Rachel walked into my office looking pale. She turned over her phone to me. Mom's Facebook page, loaded with postings regarding our business, showed up on the screen. One post cried, Thompson Paint is drowning in debt. Another said, Emily Thompson is running it into the ground. Internal source reveals Emily Thompson intends to flee using company money to go to Mexico. For the following 48 hours, we were in trouble. We reassured our staff and clients of the company's financial viability in letters. Our legal team wrote Mom a cease and desist letter threatening a lawsuit should she failed to back off her remarks. It surprised me to find that it worked. Mom might have run out of fight, or she might have at last understood she had gone too far. She retracted whatever the explanation the following day. I, Sarah Thompson, now take back what I said earlier about Thompson Paint and Varnish Company and Emily Thompson, CEO. My accusations were made in wrath and unjustified. I truly regret any uncertainty or inconvenience my remarks could have caused. Reading her words made me feel both sad and relieved. Once my mother, this woman was now only a cruel stranger determined to ruin what Dad had created. 2 months went in relative calm. Rachel and I had found a nice rhythm. The company was humming. The legal battles left wounds that were gradually healing. I dared to believe that perhaps, just maybe, we could move on. But life often throws curveballs when you least expect them. Following a long day at the office, I was walking to my car on a clear autumn evening. The parking lot was almost empty, long shadows created over the asphalt by the lowering sun. I froze as I stumbled for my keys, a familiar voice. Cater. Turning slowly, I barely believed what I was seeing. Looking small and worn, there was my mother. Mom, asks my voice just above a whisper. I said, "What are you doing here?" She shuffled her feet, not quite looking at me. "I have some thought about your offer. Is that offer still on the table? The $100,000? I'll pick it up and go leave you alone." I was mute for a brief instant. Then, shockingly to me, I started laughing. It was a worn-out, skeptical chuckle, not a joyous one. "Are you really?" I at last managed to say. "After all you expose us to? The litigation, the slander, the lies?" Mom's visage grew harsh. "Now listen here, young lady." "No, you listen," interrupted her, feeling years of pent-up resentment explode. "That offer ended the moment you chose to drag us through court. Mom, it has vanished, exactly like any respect or affection I had left for you." She paled then, heated with wrath. "You unappreciative small." "I'm not finished," I responded, sounding icy. "I will sue you for every dollar you have left should you ever try to threaten me or damage our business once more. And believe me, I will win." I got in my car and left without waiting for a reply, seeing her decreasing shape in my rearview mirror. Though it seemed the conclusion of a chapter, it also marked the start of something fresh. The next several weeks were a frenzy of activity. Rachel and I pushed ourselves into work, growing the business in the kinds of manner Dad had only imagined. We started 3 new factories, introduced a new environmentally friendly paint line, and even began a scholarship program for would-be young business owners. Dad's memories served as our lighthouse over it all. A continual reminder of our background and goals, we kept his picture on the wall of our main conference room. Dad was gone, but his legacy went on. Through us, through the business he had created from nothing, through the love he had shared with Rachel, and through the fortitude he had encased in me. Regarding Rachel and me specifically, we were more than just business colleagues. We were family, bonded more by love, respect, and a common dream than by blood.